So hello everyone. So this is Simon Nott Zooms In number 4, and I'm joined by my old pal, I'd like to say, Mark Holder, a professional gambler. And before I carry on, this is a fairly new thing for YouTube for me. If you'd like to subscribe and like it and comment, whatever, I'm told that that helps us along. So if you'd be good enough to do that. Anyway, Mark, it's a while since we've seen each other. I've seen you on your picture, at least on the paper, on a weekly basis. So what have you been up to?
Well, I think when was the last time we saw each other? Probably about 2 or 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
I've taken a bit of a step back over the last 8 or 9 months from hard studying form. I think it was probably April last year. Well, I actually decided in March last year that I wasn't going to study the form like I had done to the same extent for the previous sort of 30, 35 years. So I would now say that I read form as opposed to studying it. And studying it is, for me, studying it was having four of the most difficult races a day, looking at those races like I'd never seen one of those runners before, and just studying those horses, looking back through their previous runs, having no preconceived ideas, and then formulating how I thought they should bet on that particular race. Now, it might not have been the most time efficient way to do things, but it certainly worked for me. And I never really changed that way. But towards the probably March of last year, Simon, I thought there was probably more to life than being locked away in an office every day, just studying races. Um, as you get older, you have slightly different priorities. And I thought, well, I didn't want to be there in 10 years' time. So it was pretty much a snap decision that I made, I think, yeah, probably end of March last year. And then within a month of the end of April, at the last meeting at Sandown, I think that was when I stopped studying races. And then I thought I'd probably come back and start again in June or July. And I think I did come back and start studying, what I would say hard studying a few hurdle races. I had a bit of success. I think I won a little bit of money. But the thing that changed was that I didn't have the same buzz about it that I had done previously. And also what coincided when I sort of took a step back at the end of April, the Racing Post contacted me out of the blue. I had done a few previous columns for them and asked me if I would write the occasional column once every 6 weeks for them during the summer. And I was happy to do that. Whenever I'd done it in the past, I'd always felt under pressure because there was limited hours for me in the week to get it done. But suddenly I had a lot more time, and going from doing them and not minding doing them, but I actually went to really, really, really enjoyed writing them because I had lots of time, I had lots of spare mental capacity, and I thought that those columns that I did during the summer, they were not as bad as the ones I'd done previously, which led on to me doing something more regularly for them from the beginning of November.
Anyway, I dare to say that you've arrived, haven't you, writing these columns because you've been insulted on the TV by Matt Chapman, no less.
I'm not sure I was. I'm not sure I'm insulted by him. He did refer to me as an absolute nutcase.
It's not normally a complimentary thing to say about
Well,
somebody.
I know, but I think there's a difference. I mean, the people on television have are there to entertain, aren't they? And he's fairly entertaining. I think I picked up. He was either missing the point that I'd made on purpose, and I was basically making the point that handicap ratings or official ratings, if you look at them, they're going to offer you no edge whatsoever as far as betting is concerned, and that is hopefully fairly obvious to anybody who's watching this. And he said that ignoring them, that I was an absolute nutcase, but I'm not sure I'm not sure he intended to insult me, and he didn't. I didn't find it insulting anyway.
So you've got the column. I noticed that you've mentioned chasers in it. So have you sort of broadened your interests and your horizons? Because you always focused on hurdlers, didn't you, when you were
I
doing
did,
your
yeah.
advising?
So no, there's a complete difference. So I probably enjoy racing as a whole more now than I ever have done in about the last 30 years. So for me, it was always a job that had to be done on a daily basis, just purely trying to look for edges in the betting market. So I would study the grotty 0 to 100 12 runner handicap hurdles at Plumpton on a Monday, or the Hexham 16 runner 3 mile handicap hurdles, anything where that I thought I could find an edge. And the edges were more likely to be found in the races that fewer people looked at. And of course, if you're writing in the Racing Post, most readers want to read about things that they know about or that they have some sort of idea about. So Cheltenham is obviously, whether we like it or not, Cheltenham is a massive thing as far as the jumping community is concerned. And so even from the start of November, the Racing Post, when I suggested this column, they asked me if I would start writing or mention horses about Cheltenham. So I started looking at things in a completely different way. So I was always sort of trying to take a long-term view to think about how things could get on at Cheltenham. I had never studied chases as far as the betting was concerned. So I started looking at those, particularly the Irish runners. So I still think I'm playing catch up a bit with the chasers because I haven't got the background of knowledge that I have with the hurdlers. But this year certainly has been quite a learning curve. The last few months have been quite a learning curve. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm really enjoying doing it.
I was going to say, you're sounding very sort of enthusiastic. There's a part of you wish that maybe
I always sound enthusiastic.
part of you wish maybe you'd done this like a decade before, or was this the time never right?
No, to be honest with you, it was never really right because, as I say, betting was my job, and so I had to look in the area that I felt had the most upside for me, whether I liked it or not. So the difference between me then and me now is I do it because I enjoy doing it. Before I did it and it was my job. And not to say I didn't enjoy doing it and it was a challenge, but it was, it was never, I think people sort of believe it's easy. It's a tough job. Not that I'm not that I'm against what I did, but I've got two sons, and if they had come to me and said that they wanted to do what I did, I'd have been mortified because I thought it was quite a tough way to make a living unless you are really inspired to do it. You've got a slightly different personality in that you're very happy to be locked away for long hours away from everybody else, not listening to everybody else, not talking to anybody else. And I think that's really pretty much what I did for 25, 30 years, different to a lot of people. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted other than people that I could learn from. So I've talked about Steve Goff a lot in the past, and I didn't really learn about horses from Steve, but I learned about approaches. And there was different people over the years that I either phoned or read or anything that could talk to me about an approach. I'm never really interested in their opinion on a particular horse, but was there something that they were doing that I could do that would be a benefit to me? I think that you picked up from your interview that you did with Andrew that one, it's a lonely job, and two is psychologically it's pretty tough because obviously you're going to have tough times when things don't go as you would want. And it doesn't mean that there's a lack of effort or you're doing anything wrong. It's just really the nature of the game. And so that was when it probably got its toughest. And in a period over 30 years plus, I had quite a few times when I wish I was doing anything other than what I was doing.
Now, it's interesting you said, did it stop getting glamorous? Because I imagine as a young man, when you were winning fortunes and you were driving flash cars and you bought a nice house, it would have been quite a glamorous way of making a living. Is it become a drudge after a while?
I never ever thought of it as glamorous. I never thought of it as glamorous. I just did it. It was just my job to do it. Now, the trouble is with betting horses, if you're successful, so let's just say most people go to work, and I would think the best advice that you could give anyone who did a job was to do it because you love it, not because of the money. But I started out doing it because I loved it. And if you did okay, then obviously financially you did quite well. So the byproduct of that success of doing well at my job was relative financial success. And then the byproduct of that is that you provide yourself with slightly bigger houses than normal, or perhaps slightly faster cars. But none of those things actually make you happy. You've done okay, and you've just got to. There's a feeling when you're young that success is everything, but looking back, it isn't really. I would say, as I say to my kids, that they're better off doing something that they enjoy and forget the money aspect, because that will normally follow if you do, and you can only do something well that you enjoy doing. It's like writing the Racing Post column that I do on a weekly basis. If I didn't enjoy doing it, I couldn't do it. And every week I start with a blank piece of paper. There's nothing to write. I haven't seen a race. I probably haven't got any ideas what I want to write. And there's a there's a fair amount of pressure in the early part of the week, hoping that something comes into my head or that I see something that I can then write about. And what I want to do with that column is, and I take it you read it, right?
I do read it.
Great. So, but
Well,
what
I
I'm,
haven't read them all. I'll be lying if I said
no,
I've read
that's
them all.
okay. But
But I've recently subscribed, especially.
well, thank you very much. But what I'm trying to do with that, and you can tell me if I've achieved it, I'm trying to look at, I don't want to repeat something that's already been said or that is, is obvious to everybody. So I'm trying to look at it in a slightly different way than perhaps other people look at it. But it's got to be two things. First of all, it's got to be interesting to read for just, people who are interested in horse racing. I hope it achieves that. But secondly, and importantly, what I wanted to try and do was bring in lessons that I've learned over 30 years. Now, when I started, okay, it was, for me, studying form was all collateral form. It was all using £1 per length. It was never considering the pace of the race. I probably didn't do a tissue for the race either. And it was basically where I've got from where I started and today is all a learning process in that I wanted to become cleverer. So I didn't have any idea that when I started, 35 years later, I'd be looking at racing in a completely different way. So what I'm trying to do is to give people a shortcut and say, because if it did work, it's like Matthew Chapman went on about, official ratings that I'm not sure whether he meant that they are a benefit to punters, because I said they weren't, and he called me an absolute nutcase. So if you take it that he was actually saying the obvious to what I'm saying, that it's quite obvious they're not. So if you've got somebody who's new to betting and says, okay, well, if I study official ratings and if I find a weight for age race and one horse is rated 150 and another horse is rated 143, then the horse rated 150 should win this race. Well, it might win, but there's no edge in that as far as betting is concerned. The only way you make a profit in this game is from finding different things that other people aren't seeing. And again, going back to your video with Andrew, which is what he talks about. So he talks about the draw bias, but so high numbers might have an advantage on the straight course at Newcastle. So people want to oppose low numbers, but if they do it to such an extent that the low numbers become a bigger price than they should be, even accounting for the poor draw, then all of a sudden you have to do the opposite to what your mind probably tells you to do, and that really is it. It's a weird thing. When people go horse racing, these are casual friends of mine. They'll say, I'm going to Taunton on Thursday, I'll give you a ring. And it always fills my mind with dread, because they want to back winners. They're only going once, they might go twice a year. And of course, the profit really doesn't really matter. But I'm always going to come at it from a value perspective. And that value perspective will only play itself out over probably 100, 200, 500 bets. Well, they're going to have 6. So I always say, well, if you want to enjoy your day, just bet all the favourites. They're the most likely horses to win. But if you want to make a profit, listen to me, but you will probably make a loss on the day.
It's interesting. A couple of times you've mentioned in the past tense that betting was your livelihood. So, I mean, 2 questions really. I'm assuming that the Racing Post column isn't enough to keep you in the manner to which you become accustomed. And also, have you totally given up betting altogether?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't given up betting. I've given up the day-to-day stuff, and that was for several reasons, really. One is because the trickiness to get on. Now, I did have outlets where I could get on, so I wouldn't say that was the main reason. But if punting is your main source of income, you need to generate sufficient turnover, because let's say you make, I don't know, 10% would be good. I think I've achieved slightly more than that over the years, probably about 15%. But that means, so to stake 100, to win 15 grand, you're going to have to stake 100. To win 75 grand, you're going to have to stake 500,000. And it is not that straightforward getting that sort of money on nowadays. And even if you can get it on through different outlets, which I could, then you have to accept that those outlets, because they're following you inside, they're going to have to accept the ups and downs of it as well. So it isn't particularly straightforward. And I think also because I did one thing for a long period of time, and I wasn't particularly stupid with my money after, once I started doing this, that I'm in a sort of situation where it isn't imperative. I mean, I say this, I don't think I'm ever going to lose because I'm not. It's so interesting. You asked Andrew a question at the end of your Zoom or your YouTube thing with him. Pardon?
I'm just saying this is Andrew Mount for people that
Yeah,
haven't
Andrew
seen
Mann, yeah.
previous ones.
And you said, did he bet because he wanted to, or did he bet because he had to? Was it something like that you asked him? And
Yeah,
I
like
would,
that, yeah.
yeah, and I would say I only bet in the past because I had to. Betting is of no interest to me. I don't get any thrill out of betting. I don't get any thrill out of not betting. If I never had another bet from today onwards, it wouldn't particularly worry me. I do still bet in running, but again, not to the intensity that I used to do it when I would never miss a race. But I'm sat here watching a lot of races most days, so I will bet in running. I think there's an edge to be had in that for me. I mean, some people do Sudoku, some people do crosswords. I just bet in running. And the liquidity on Betfair has what I probably shrunk by 66%. So you have to anticipate that from the heyday, even if people haven't got any cleverer and I'm exactly the same, well, my profits must drop by 66% because the liquidity is so much less. So I still do that.
Okay, now I don't want to get too intrusive, but you sort of said you've looked after your money, so you're in a position where you don't really need to, you don't need to win.
Well,
Is
no,
there going to be a point? Well, no, you still want to win, but is there going to be a point where you have to go back to it because there's no other way of earning any money?
I don't know. I'm never going to go back to it. Sorry. I'm never going to go back. I'm never going to go back to studying with the intensity of locking myself away. I'm never going to do that again. No. I wouldn't have said that in April of last year because I genuinely thought that a break, I would want to do it. But I came back in June and July, and despite having some success, I didn't enjoy it. I then probably thought, okay, I went to see my son in America in October, and then I thought I'd come back at the end of October and I'd start studying hard again. I haven't got the same will and enthusiasm and motivation now that I did have all those years ago. And, you and I are exactly the same age. And there's every chance that we've got more years behind us than we have in front of us. So I don't necessarily want to spend all those years stuck in an office.
Okay, now, so one of the things you stopped doing as well was your private client tipping service. Now, I bet the bookmakers are extremely happy about that. And there's a group of I don't know how many people that have all of a sudden lost their second income. Have you had much feedback off of your previous clients?
Yeah, when I gave up, because I think it was a shock to them, and I made the decision on a day in March, and I thought about it for the afternoon, and then I sent them an email, and I did have some very, very nice emails from people that I had changed their financial circumstances for over the previous years, which was, and that was obviously when you get emails like that or messages or phone calls like that, it was well, obviously it was really nice to get it, and that in itself is slightly motivating. But I think there comes a time in everybody's life when you can sort of have a slight change of direction. And I've been really lucky. And I think I've been so fortunate in my life that one, I made a living at doing something that when I started, I would have done for free. But now being in a position where I can write a column for the Racing Post, which I really enjoy doing, that gives me motivation. I'm going to do that I've started that at the end of October, and I'll do it to the end of the jump season. And then we'll have a break. Whether I do it next year, whether they ask me next year, I don't know. But I have thoroughly enjoyed doing that.
Okay, would you sort of be open to branching out further in sort of media work?
No, I definitely wouldn't. No, no.
Chapman off of his perch?
No, no, I wouldn't. I like doing what I like doing, and I would have no interest in any television work. I'd have no interest in writing for anybody else either. The people I deal with at the Racing Post are just an absolute delight to deal with. And again, you get yourself into a position in life that you only, if you can only work with people that you enjoy working with, like I enjoy doing this video with you, but I only really want to be doing things with people that I like to do things with. I've got myself into a position through grinding away for many, many years that I'm fortunate to have that choice.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you very much. No, but just with the tipping thing, you were doing that, and I'm assuming that when you were doing it, it was all just part of the day's work, and you were happy to lock yourself into your room and all that. Did you sort of notice when you finished a release of pressure that you didn't realize that you had?
Yes, yeah, a massive release of pressure. Yeah, it was the last mission I did at Sandown was very emotional at the end of April. It was a real relief, and it was very strange because even though obviously I had short periods of time off in that sort of 30 odd years, I was always thinking about what I was going to do. So you're never completely shut off from it. And obviously, you want to do well for your clients. If you have very good runs, you know that there's a bad run just around the corner. And if you have a very bad run, you don't know how long that bad run is going to last. So there's always a bit of pressure. And once that pressure was released after so many years, I just would never, ever want to go back to it. And that's, give me, if I was 30 years younger, I'd probably want to do it. But as I say, just you have different times of your life. I've got, three kids. One lives in America, one lives in London, one's more local. I want to spend time with them. At some stage, I'm guessing, well, one of them's going to be getting married in the next year or two. Then there might be grandchildren. And I think if racing is a job that if I was going to do it well, I know that it's going to be all encompassing and it's going to be something that I'm going to have to dedicate pretty much all of my hours to. If I'm advising people, if I'm betting purely for myself, couldn't do it just by picking up the paper one day and then putting it down for 4 or 5 days. You really have to be absolutely on top of it all the time. Nowadays, I think my betting is probably more to do with anti-post. So I think when you asked me this when you probably first talked to me in 2018, did I have anti-post? And I never did. And now, because I'm looking at things for Cheltenham and I slightly have a different approach, for the first time in my life, I've started having a few anti-post bets. Nothing that's going to make a huge amount of difference to me, but horses that, any bet I have, so I want to believe, whether it's true or not, I want to believe that I've got the value. And that's, so, anti-post betting, I do a little bit of now.
Okay, you said that you wouldn't mind if you never had another bet, and betting was like a means to an end. But is the love for horse racing still there? Would you be interested in sort of getting involved in a leg and going to the races and going to the stable? I mean, you were brought up in a racing stable. Is that passion still there, or
Oh,
is
I've
that
got
sort of waned?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, my passion for horse racing, as I said just a few minutes ago, is probably more than ever now because I actually enjoy it. So I get to read the Racing Post every day now from the front page to the back page. I can take more of an interest in sort of the political side of horse racing, which is obviously quite interesting. I don't know enough about it. I can also take a view about, just horse racing as a whole. I can enjoy a meeting and have no interest in it and not be particularly looking for something that I'm thinking this could be of interest to bet again in 10 days' time or to look at again in 10 days' time. So I would say my love for horse racing now is replicated to what it was probably like in my early 20s. And then it became my job. Didn't mean to say I didn't love horse racing, but I think I used to do a podcast with Andrew Lowry. And I think what came across in those when I listened back was that Andrew probably had more of a love for horse racing at that time than I did because I just saw it as a job. But once it stopped being my job nearly a year ago, gradually my love for racing has come back. Wouldn't say I didn't always love it, but I enjoy it now for the sport as much as I ever did. Probably not, if not more.
Yeah, because those podcasts were very popular, weren't they? And I remember one episode where you said you don't bother reading anything that's going to clutter up. You don't, so you wouldn't read the politics stuff. You wouldn't read the news of it because that would be just getting in the way of the brain space you needed for, or words to that effect that you needed
Yeah,
to
that's
sort
true.
of find the winners.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with yourself in the daytime these days? And if you're, I'm assuming you're smashing the handicap with Steve and Andy. Is that still a thing?
What golf?
Yeah.
Well, I don't. I've only played with them a couple of times a year, but I have golf has become certainly something that I took up. I took it up in. I'd always played 1 or 2 rounds a year until about. I think I joined a golf club in 22, 23, very badly, and I had become slightly obsessed with it. So I would play golf probably 4 or 5 times a week. Not. I haven't got time for 18 holes, but I'm normally the first person on the tee at 8 o'clock in the morning this time of year, and I'll play 9 holes, and I'll be done by 9:45, and that means that I can be back in my office probably for 10:15, and then the rest of the day will be on racing. But I had this obsession to improve as a punter from the very first time I started, and now I've got an obsession to improve as a golfer. And
So
I'll
you
tell you what,
still
golfing and racing aren't dissimilar because you can put a lot of effort in and you don't always get out what you deserve.
so you still spend your afternoons watching the racing. So are you still sort of sat there looking for opportunities to bet in running? You give us a little bit, but people will be watching this
Yeah.
still aspiring. So the sort of angles you're maybe looking at.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I do. So I study. I still watch all the racing. I still sectionally time all the races. So that I've still got sectional times for all the races. I have access to all the sectional times for the chases as well, even though I don't do them. I did start doing them, but it became so much work that somebody else does those. So I have all the access to sectional times. So I'm still looking, so I guess, first of all, with the punting, I'm looking for massive mistakes. So something that's been, so go back to the old days. So I would take a race and I'm going to study those 12 runners as if I've never seen them before and then put them in a pecking order, put down the prices I think they should be, and then bet things that are massively overpriced, in my opinion. Okay. So now, because I do all the sectional times, I now have horses that I think might be slightly better or slightly worse in the public perception. And if those are sort of borne out in the prices that are available, then those are races that I would study, but that might be 4 or 5 races a week as opposed to 40 or 50 races a week. So that's on that side, it's a bit easier. And then the in running, so I used to say be fairly obsessed with that. I think there'd be 50 races on a Saturday and I'd do every one. Now I'm just, when went away from Betfair because of the premium charge that I was paying, I was giving them 40% and I paid them a lot of money over the years, but they got rid of that premium charge and introduced an expert fee at the beginning of January, which did change things a little bit for me and made it slightly better that I wouldn't be giving them 40% of everything unless I went over a specific amount, and then it would go to 20%. And I think if you win over 100 grand, it's 40%. Well, I used to, but not for many years have I've achieved that figure with Betfair. So all of a sudden that became more interesting. But when I wasn't betting and running for 5 or 6 months, I used to watch races and I would think, that horse is going too fast, or this is a very slow pace. This horse is making his ground too quickly. And these were all instances where I couldn't really take advantage of them. So when I came back, I was like a caged animal waiting to get out. But it made me cleverer in many respects because I used to take a view in nearly every single race. And now I'd probably bet in fewer races. I watch every race, but I'm looking for specific things that happen in a race whereby a horse's odds contract when they should be lengthening. So the best one of those is if a horse makes ground too quickly during a race, then that's not always to be said, but often his price will contract when it really should be lengthening, because if you use up too much energy in the middle part of the race, well, there's going to be nothing left for the end of the race. Another one is front runners tend to shorten in price, sometimes rightly, but some of the time they should be lengthening. It all depends how quick they've gone. So when you see the first race on a day, it's hard to know whether they've gone too quick. But if you've timed the other races, then you can see, okay, so the first hurdle race, let's give you Ludlow, for example. Your first hurdle race is run over 2 miles and they come up the straight from the first hurdle to the line at 32 seconds on both occasions. Now that suggests they've gone a pretty level gallop throughout. So you watch a race later on in the afternoon of a similar quality, and the tearaway leader goes from the first in the straight to the line in 29 seconds. Well, he's gone 15 lengths quicker on good ground than the earlier race. That horse's price will shorten. It should be double because the likelihood is that he is not going to be able to maintain that pace. A really good way of thinking about it. And I pay, if you, do you ever go on the rowing machine?
I used to. I haven't done for a
Right.
bit.
Okay. So if I put you on a rowing machine now, okay, and said to you, Simon, I want you to row 2,000 meters as fast as you can, okay? And you have got to go flat out, always be putting in the maximum effort. Okay, so let's say you managed to get through the first 1,000 meters in 4 minutes 30, okay? I reckon you would be so gasping for the second 1,000 meters, you might do an overall time of like 12 minutes. So 4 minutes 30 and 7 minutes 30, which would overall come down to like that's a minute and a half for every 250 meters, 90 seconds for every 250 meters. Okay. So now if I said to you, right, Simon, we'll give you 2 or 3 days off for you to recover. Without put you on a rowing machine. Now I want you to row at 90 seconds per 250 meters until you get to the last 500 meters and then go flat out. And I reckon you'd knock probably a minute off your time. So the pace that a horse runs at and the way they use their energy is so important because, like I said, using that analogy with rowing, if you just go flat out, you're not sort of spacing out your energy in an effective way, which means that you will slow down at the end. And it's exactly the same with a horse. Going back to going to the rowing. So if I said to you, right, start off slowly for the first 800 meters and then go flat out for 400 meters, then again, that is you're not using your energy the most effective way. And that's a really little bit like a horse race when you'll see they've gone a reasonable gallop and suddenly a horse will quicken up massively halfway through the race and his price will shorten because people are believing that he's going to sustain that energy all the way to the line. But the truth is he can't physically do it. So the pace of a race, if I had my time again and I could go right back to the start, and if you said to me now, what would be the one thing I'd concentrate on more than anything, it would be looking at the way the race was run and looking at the way it disadvantaged some horses and it advantaged other horses. And I didn't really, even when I started doing sectional times 20 years ago, I didn't really grasp it. It wasn't probably into the last 3 or 4 years that I've really dialed into that and looked at the way things work for horses. And that just shows you, Si, you could be on the best horse in the race and you could bet him at the value price. But if he doesn't get the optimum ride or he gets a less than optimum ride, then that horse isn't going to perform. So we go to today's jockeys that I believe, jump jockeys, I think they're the best we've ever had. And you look at people like Sean Bowen, Harry Cobden in the North, Henry Book, Sean Quinlan, Brian Hughes. They are just brilliant judges of paces. And I've probably left some out there that I shouldn't have left out. But jockeys that judge pace correctly, as opposed to the ones that look the strongest in the finish, are the jockeys that generally we should expect to bet at slightly shorter prices their mounts, because I think they've got an advantage over the rest of the field.
Okay, and so you're doing all this from home, and the only person I've met previously wins from home is Matthew Mantle, and he tends to do most of his business in the early parts of the race. I suppose that's a similar thing. You have to make your decisions way before they get into the business end.
Well, yeah. So going back to the running, I would say that what you have to, when you look at a race, look at what happens in the first half of the race will normally play out, mean what plays out in the second part of the race. So if you see things in the early part of the race, then you say a horse pulls too hard, or it runs too free, or a horse makes too much ground very quickly, or a horse gets an easy lead. Those are things that then you can take advantage of later on in the race. So again, people who do a bet in running are pretty sharp, okay? But you have no chance in betting things from the second last to the line on what's happening then. What you could do though, if you saw a horse, say, make up a huge amount of ground, say from the last hurdle on the far side at Taunton to the first hurdle in the straight. Now his price will shorten. You could hopefully assume that he's not going to be able to maintain that pace all the way to the line. So it would be fair to lay him from the second last to the line. People are seeing things before you. You have to accept that. But again, you've got a reason for doing it. And likewise, if the leaders had appeared to go too fast and you had something that was coming, say, jump the last on the far side at Taunton, using that course again, 15 lengths behind, you could bet that horse in the closing stages, hoping that the first three tire and that this horse will come through and win. I think in running punting is, if you do it, it's not essentially that hard to win, provided you are prepared. One is to wait, and two is to only take on what is offered. In other words, some people say, I want to win £10 a race, or I want to win £20 a race. And that's just nuts, because, you know, some races you can win considerably more, and other races you can't win anything at all. You've just got to wait for the races where things, well, where what has panned out is different to what the majority of people think they're seeing.
Okay, well, that's fascinating stuff. I'm sure people have been scribbling down and be rewinding this. I think that's pretty much our time, Mark. I did actually see you've even been going on holiday and things like that, haven't you?
That's the trouble with having you as a friend on Facebook. You know far too much about my private life. No, I went to I went to the US. I went to the US to see my son who got engaged. He lives in Austin, so went there. Loved my time at America. The Americans, I have got a different attitude towards life and enjoying it than a lot of people in the UK. So hopefully I'll spend a bit more time out there. I'd never like to live out there, but I'm gonna probably spend a bit more time out there in the coming years for sure.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much for giving up your time, Mark. Hopefully we'll catch you again in the
Oh
future.
yeah,
And
pleasure to do it always, Si. Pleasure to do it.
next column is on a Wednesday in the Racing Post on a
It's on a
weekly basis.
Wednesday. Yeah, it's on a Wednesday in the Racing Post. Yeah, so the Racing Post readership has gone up by 2 since I started doing the column. You, because you told me you read it, and my mum, who buys the Racing Post every Wednesday and then rings me on a Thursday. And she said, "I've read your column." I said, "Oh, what do you think?" She said, "Well, I read it, but I didn't understand it." So
Well, I subscribed digitally and I had a special reduction. So I got the value there anyway. So that's good
good.
news. Anyway, Mark, well, thanks ever so much for your time. Like I said at the beginning, this is something I've got to tell people. Thanks to Mark actually told me this. Subscribe, like, and make some comments if you've enjoyed what you've seen and heard today. Anyway, Mark Holder, thank you very much, mate. Appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Si. See you soon.
Cheers.